Today, can a third-party movement succeed in the U.S. political system? Hi, Malika.
Good to be here.
Now, joining her on the couch is Kornblut, Deputy National Political Editor for The Washington Post. Welcome to the stream, Anne. Nice to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, looking forward to demystifying some of the aspects of U.S. politics for us. Should be a really good discussion, hopefully. So good to have you there. Now, we're also looking forward to hearing from the panel today that we have in our Google Plus Hangout. If you want to take part in a future Hangout, just add the stream to one of your Google Plus circles. Looking forward to everybody's views over there. For most, you're born into it. The bipartisan landscape in the United States has largely left voters with a choice of either Democrat or Republican. Lack of funds and signatures have often kept alternative candidates off the ballot. But an increasing number of people are beginning to look for leaders outside the confines of the two-party system. Now, a recent Washington Post poll shows that nearly half of adults in the U.S. believe a third political party is necessary. Let me show you this poll over here. Of all adults, 48% say that a third political party is necessary, and those identifying themselves as independent or liberals in particular feel that a third party is necessary. Well, the Libertarian Party, which was founded in 1971, has now become the country's third largest and fastest growing party. Its policies advocate minimal government involvement, drug legalization, and anti-taxation, to name a few. But the dark horse third-party candidates have yet to make it to the White House, and they've often been accused of actually siphoning votes from the bigger players, and we'll get into that in the discussion. Joining us now to discuss this is one of those contenders, Libertarian presidential candidate and former governor of New Mexico, Gary Johnson. Welcome to the stream, Governor. First of all, for many of us, I mean, it seems from the outset, a third-party candidate or anybody running as any sort of independent stands absolutely no chance when it comes to election here. So why bother?
Well, here's the pie-in-the-sky scenario. Pie-in-the-sky scenario is that the Libertarian candidate for president will be on the ballot in all 50 states. If the Libertarian candidate for president polls at 15%, a Libertarian candidate for president will be on the national debate stage with Obama, and I'm believing it's going to be Romney. And given, as you mentioned at the start, 80% of Americans now are saying they would consider voting for a third-party candidate. I don't think that number has ever been so high. So that's the pie-in-the-sky scenario that anything can possibly happen. And given the Republican process of late, we've seen this whack-a-mole process where the cycle lasts about 18 days. So for me, if I'm the Libertarian nominee, middle of October might start that 18-day cycle.
And for you, why does America need libertarianism? Why does it need a libertarian candidate running on libertarian principles? And what are libertarian principles in a nutshell?
Well, just speaking with a broad brush, I think the majority of Americans describe themselves as fiscally conservative and socially liberal. I think that's, with a broad brushstroke, that's how most of us in this country describe themselves, I being one of those. Cut warfare, but cut welfare. Gay rights, gun rights. Let's balance the federal budget, but then let's get over on the civil liberties side and stop the continued intrusion on all of our lives. Government telling us what we can and can't do in the bedroom. Stop. Don't do it.
And why do you think there's been this kind of duopoly in the United States? How did it happen that you're either a Democrat or Republican and nothing else?
Well, historically, the two parties have wielded a lot of control over the process. Getting on the ballot simply in all of the states is something that's often controlled by the parties. And obviously getting the nomination, and financially speaking, a lot of the money is funneled through the two parties. I think that over time that has broken down some, in part because of the numbers that you showed from our most recent poll, and in part because you've seen both parties at different moments be fractured, have opposing views held within a single party. And so I think we're at a point right now where the two parties are probably about as weak as they've ever been. What we're seeing, especially as the governor mentioned on the Republican side, is a process where there really is no Republican establishment that can sort of rise up and dictate who the nominee is going to be. And I think that's a reflection of where the voters are. Now, is that to say that it's going to be easy for any kind of outside candidate or a third-party candidate to get this done? Absolutely not. There's been an outside group, Americans Elect, that has worked very hard to raise money and get on the ballot in all the states, and even they haven't been able to come up with a nominee for themselves. So I think the mindset has pretty much sunk in with a lot of people that it's either Democrat or Republican, and that's the way the thing is structured. But this appetite, I would never rule it out. Maybe if it's not this election season, then in another one, especially when you continue to have people of the governor's stature actually running on that ticket.
Yeah, interesting point you make there, that there's an appetite for something different, for change, and that's very democratic, is it not? Malika, talking about democracy, we're very democratic here because we've got a whole host of people in a Google Plus Hangout ready to contribute. Yeah.
Exactly, Governor. I'm going to go straight to our Google Plus Hangout, and this is a question from Mark, who's in D.C., who identifies himself as a libertarian. Mark, go ahead.
Hi, Governor. Do you feel that the media has been dismissive of you because you're running as a third-party candidate, or do you think there's a media bias against libertarian candidates or folks with libertarian leanings?
Well, I was, I thought, unfairly excluded from the Republican debates, which very simply, I was not in the polls that determined who was in the debates. And if you can't be in the poll, how can you possibly be in the debate? And the polls that I was in, I was polling the same or higher than those that were on stage. So for me, arguably, I got to serve as the Libertarian governor of New Mexico for 8 years under the guise of being a Republican. I'll tell you a personal story. Is about 4 weeks ago, I was at the Florida State Convention, Libertarian Convention. I was at the State Fair, and I manned the State Fair booth for the Libertarian Party. I bought a Libertarian T-shirt to stand behind the booth. I have never worn a Republican T-shirt in my life because there is certain Republican dogma that I just can't defend. I never have, and I never will. And as a Libertarian, there is nothing that I can't defend about the philosophy.
Yes, there are many things, Governor, that you say which have strong parallels with Ron Paul, who's on those GOP debates. I mean, I remember watching the foreign policy GOP debate where Ron Paul, who shares many views with you, seemed to be like he was from another planet when you compare his views to the other Republican candidates over there. How do you think Ron Paul has done so far? As you mentioned, under the guise of being a Republican, if you want to put it that way, while still on that ticket, how do you think he's done during those debates?
Well, I thought he's done really well, and I support Ron Paul. I hope he gets the nomination. I don't think he is going to, and so what happens to this message? Running as a Republican, I think it's important from a communication standpoint that people hear the same message from different sources. When you hear the same message from different sources, you know what? It resonates a little bit more. I get it. If you're just hearing it from Ron Paul or you're just hearing it from me, it doesn't resonate so well. And it needs to be more than just a few. It needs to be when that many candidates on stage are all saying the same things. That's when we're going to get this change. But Ron Paul, where does this message, where does this agenda go when Ron Paul is not successful getting the Republican nomination? I hope to be the one that carries this message of liberty and freedom going forward.
Governor Buddy Roemer, who is also a former Republican, running as an independent now as well, the former governor of Louisiana, who we had on the show very recently, has just tweeted to us saying the two parties are joined at the billfold. America is ready for a third party. Is he right? Is it all about the money?
No, he's absolutely right. This country's up for sale, and both parties are selling it. Both parties have their hands out for money from individuals, groups, corporations, to pay for those individuals, those groups, those corporations to have an unfair spot in the line, in the front of the line. And what this country should be about is creating a level playing field for everyone, as opposed to those that can buy it, and they do buy it.
Governor, can I ask ask you a question? I'm wondering what you think about the rise of super PACs, which obviously, for viewers who don't know, are these big money organizations that can have unlimited donations from any single source. Is there any chance that the super PACs could ever help a third-party candidate in the way that they've helped some lesser-known or lesser-funded Republican candidates? Obviously, one single donor has been able to help Newt Gingrich at moments in time when he hasn't been doing well. Is there a single donor who could help a third-party candidate at some point in the future?
Oh, no, I think you hit it on the head completely with a super PAC. I mean, one donor could make that kind of difference. I'm in the camp that believes that when it comes to campaign finance reform, no limits, just make it 100% transparent. In my opinion, that's the reform that's needed when it comes to campaign finance reform. What people don't understand is when you limit contributions, I think there's a lot more influence that tries to get wielded as opposed to when there are fewer contributors being able to contribute more money.
Well, there's a comment here from one of our community members on Twitter, Art Types, who says, American politics, a duopoly, that's the best laugh I've had all week. We've had a uni-party monopoly for decades, and I think that follows in the back of what you're saying. But Governor Johnson, I want to take it to our Google Plus community. This is a question from Marissa, who wants to change the subject a little bit and talk about immigration. Marissa, go ahead. Marissa, are you?
Governor, I was just wondering if your stance on immigration. Oh, I see myself talking slowly now.
Go ahead, Marissa. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was just wondering if you feel that your stance on immigration caused a rift between you and the Republican Party as a whole.
Okay, let's first qualify that. And Governor, particularly for those, our international viewers who don't know what your immigration stance is, first tell us what it is, and then answer the question, if you don't mind, sir.
Well, I think immigration is really a good thing. Let's make it as easy as possible for somebody that wants to come into this country and work to get a work visa, not a green card, not citizenship, but a work visa. Don't build a fence. What an incredible waste of money that would be. For the 11 million illegal immigrants that are here in this country right now, I think we need to set up a grace period where we can document those 11 million, get them a work visa. Will immigrants stand in line to get a work visa as opposed to crossing illegally if the line they stand in is moving? I maintain that they will stand in line if the line is moving. And then drugs, the whole prohibition of drugs, all the border violence. This is real. This is border violence that is happening. 40,000 deaths south of the border over the last 4 years. This is a prohibition phenomenon. These are disputes that are being played out with guns rather than the courts. I advocate legalizing marijuana. I advocate, when it comes to all the other drugs, looking at the drug problem first as a health issue rather than a criminal justice issue. So, in a nutshell, immigration, good thing. We're a country based on immigrants. Let's just make it as easy as possible for somebody who wants to come into this country and work to get a work visa. I'm also advocating the fair tax. So one of the big issues with immigration is how do taxes get paid? With a consumption tax, in particular the fair tax, whether you're illegal, legal, a visitor to this country, or a citizen to this country, paying the fair tax, a consumption tax, is unavoidable.
Governor, Marissa might make a really good point in the sense that it seems as if a lot of people who would be quite passionately behind you and your policies when it comes to, for example, fiscal conservatism, smaller governments, your opposition to Barack Obama's health insurance reform, they feel very passionately, particularly if you look at, for example, the Tea Party types, they feel very passionately anti-immigration. A lot of those people are still talking about, things like looking for Barack Obama's birth certificate. I mean, in a way, are you not attracting and marginalizing people at the same time?
Well, yes, but look, for anybody that declares themselves as a fiscal conservative, I got to tell you, building a fence is a crazy notion. It's as simple as if you're going to build a 10-foot fence, what's that going to take? A 12-foot ladder. If you're going to build a fence across thousands of miles of border, somebody's not going to build a tunnel? Come on. Wherever it is that you live, just imagine a fence being built across around your municipality. It wouldn't keep you or I in or out of our own municipality. It's not going to happen. It's just a crazy notion. So fiscal conservatives need to wake up. How are we spending our money? And build a fence?
And it's really interesting that, looking at it from an international perspective, because the Republicans unfairly sometimes get, tarnished with a very monolithic brush. And you have people like Gary Johnson, who's now considers himself a former Republican, Gary Johnson, Ron Paul, etc., who are saying many things which outsiders expect liberals to be saying on foreign policy, on issues like immigration and drug legalization. Tell us why and how this came to be.
Well, you've seen splits within the Republican Party on certain aspects of even immigration over time. George W. Bush was not in sync with his entire party on immigration in some ways. I think border state governors tend to have a different view of immigration we saw from Rick Perry at some moments in this Republican race than Republicans in other parts of the country. So you've seen some splits certainly on those kinds of issues. On social issues, there are moderates within the Republican Party and there are social conservatives. So I think just like the Democratic Party, the Republican Party has different wings. I think there has been a tussle recently over which wing of the Republican Party is going to win, especially with the rise of the Tea Party. And the Libertarian wing is one part of that. And I think that's one reason why not only this race for the Republican nomination has gone on so long, but also what makes it so riveting.
Yeah. Malika, you want to come in with some Google+?
I do, actually. Let's go straight to you, Richard, who's in Google+. And this is a question for you, Governor.
While you have no problem defending libertarian stances and policies, do you actually see them as wholly realistic? For example, do you see legalizing hard drugs as having no societal consequences?
Well, first of all, I am not advocating legalizing any drug but marijuana. I think, though, that we are going to legalize marijuana. 50% of Americans now support that. And when we do that, and when we realize that the world actually will probably be a better place tomorrow as opposed to what it is today, then we take giant strides toward, in my opinion, looking at the drug problem first as a health issue rather than a criminal justice issue. Holland and Portugal. Holland has effectively decriminalized all drug use. Portugal, 10 years ago, decriminalized all drug use in response to a heroin epidemic. I think it's important to point out that Portugal and Holland have 60% the drug use as that of the United States. Now, that's on a per capita basis, but that's marijuana, that's hard drugs, that's kids, and that's adults. The heroin epidemic in Portugal 10 years ago, which led them to decriminalize all drugs, they have shown a 50% reduction in heroin use. Really, it flies in the face of what you think would happen. But when you start looking at drugs first as a health issue, all sorts of good things happen. And by good things, look, people have problems with drugs. I just maintain that 90% of the drug problem is prohibition-related, not use-related. That's not to discount the problems with use and abuse, but that ought to be the focus. We got 2.3 million people behind bars in this country, half law enforcement, half the courts, and half the prisons is drug-related.
Yeah, let me actually play some of your campaign video, End the Drug War Now, which people can find on YouTube. I'll play some of this for our viewers. You talk about, money spent on arresting one citizen for a non-violent marijuana offense, $10,400. And it goes on, money spent on the court system each year for marijuana offenses, $853 million. And it goes on with some very eerie music there. Money spent each year on imprisoning marijuana offenders, $3.1 billion, if I've got that right, yes. Lots of zeros over there. I think that's the point. And total money spent on the war on drugs each year, $40 billion. Oh, is that it? Yeah, that's right, $40 billion. So, you're making a financial argument as well there. So it ties in, doesn't it, Governor, with your fiscal conservatism and your problem with the U.S. debt and the amount of what you call reckless spending. You're making a financial argument as well against the current drugs war.
Well, I'm making three promises as President of the United States. One is I promise to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. Now, that's not promising a balanced budget because Congress is going to have to go along with that. But I'm going to submit a document with a 43% reduction in federal spending year one, $1.4 trillion reduction. I think the biggest threat to our national security is the fact that we're broke. We're not immune from the mathematics of continuing to spend so much more money than what we're taking in. I also promise to veto any legislation where expenses exceed revenue. And then lastly, I promise to advocate on the part of throwing out the entire federal tax system. No more income tax, no more corporate tax, no more withholdings, no more IRS, and replace it with a consumption tax, in particular the fair tax, which I really think reboots the American economy for the next 100 years. Makes our exports more competitive and jobs, zero corporate tax rate. If that doesn't promote jobs, I don't know what will.
And then as a final question perhaps to Anne, is that given, how we know people vote at election time, the governor wants 15% of the vote to be on the ballot for him to deem it successful. Given all of those views and the fact that he's anti-war, anti the Afghanistan war, anti-starting any new wars anywhere, is that realistic that he'll get 15% of American
Well,
votes?
Given where his views are, I think if you polled people on the question of his specific views, certainly the war in Afghanistan even has become quite unpopular, and there are people, as you said, in the Republican Party and also in the Democratic Party who are against this war. And I think on some of the specific issues, if taken one by one, individuals might agree with him. Whether that will translate into votes or even to 15%, I think is very hard to say. It's a real uphill battle for any independent in terms of attention and money, and unfortunately, or for anyone who's running in that position, it does require a certain amount of money and attention. So that's not to say that people don't agree, but they may not necessarily translate into votes.
Well, that's been thought-provoking. Thank you, Governor Johnson and Anne. There's so much more we could actually talk about, but we're going to have to end it here because so much to say, so little time.